Hi everybody, in this video I'm going to tell you guys about a set of data and then we'll practice how to identify the independent and dependent variable, and then we'll do the null and alternative hypothesis. There is going to be a separate video for how to make graphs. Excuse me. So I have this friend named James. And so James is a very sciencey person. And so, sciencey people like write down stuff and keep track of things and kind of like look for trends and whatnot. You don't actually have to be a scientist to be a sciencey person. It's more like a state of mind. So my friend James is very sciencey. And so for the last 3 years on Halloween, he has written down what kinds of candy each person takes, so that he can get a total number of candy pieces taken. So he's given me the numbers. He had a couple, like 1 year he bought Twix, but then he never got them again. So I deleted the ones that were only purchased one time. And so what we have here are types of candy and numbers of pieces given away for 3 years in a row at James's house. Okay. So the independent variable is the thing that is going to be changed by the experimenter. It is super important that you not say the thing that is changed, because both the independent and dependent variable change. The distinguishing factor is what changes them. And so the independent variable is changed or manipulated by the person doing the experiment, which in this case is my friend James. And so James buys different kinds of candy at the store. And so the independent variable is going to be type of candy. Okay, so we're going to write that. Independent variable, type of candy. Okay, so then the number of pieces of candy that are taken is the other information that we have here. Coincidentally, this is a measurable thing, right? And so our dependent variable always needs to be measurable. And the dependent variable is going to change based on the independent variable. And so based on the type of candy that James buys, or the type of candy that James buys will influence the number of pieces that are taken. And so the dependent variable is the number of pieces of candy taken. Okay, so just to recap, it's just getting shorter and shorter. The independent variable is the variable that is changed by the experimenter. Super important that you not just write changed. The dependent variable is the variable that is going to be measurable. The independent variable can also be measurable, but it cannot. Like in this case, it's categories, like types of candy. So that's technically not measurable, but it could be measurable. Anyway, so the dependent variable is measurable and is the outcome variable. You could also say that it is influenced by the independent variable if you are allowed to use independent variable on the test, which you are not. So, okay, so control variables, of course, are the things that are not changed at all. And so they might be wonky, but they are held constant. So let's say that James loves beetles. I don't know. Let's say that James loves beetles. And so James gives away his candy in this gigantic beetle dish. Like, that is a little bit weird, but if he uses the same beetle dish every year, it's fine because it's a control. If 1 year he uses a beetle dish, but then the next year he has like some candy in the beetle dish, but some candy in the pumpkin dish, the dish might influence what people take, and in that case, the dish would be an independent variable. And so the control is going to be something that is kept constant throughout the course of the experiment. All right, so we have independent variable, type of candy, dependent variable, number of pieces of candy taken. So now we need to make our hypotheses, right? And so the null hypothesis, you guys are all really good at this, I'm confident, is the no effect or no difference hypothesis. And so we could say for the null hypothesis, we would say, type of candy has no effect on number of pieces taken. Or we could say the same number, seriously, of pieces of candy will be taken regardless of the candy type. Something that indicates that the independent variable does not have an important influence on the dependent variable. That is the null hypothesis, the no effect hypothesis. Just ignore that beep. I'm making soup. You probably can't even hear it. Okay. So the alternative hypothesis is going to be our prediction of the results. So generally, you write the alternative hypothesis before you have data. So this is a little bit weird because we're writing it after the fact, but in this instance, we're just going to plunge on ahead. So the alternative hypothesis is your prediction of what you will see based on previous information that you have. And so in the alternative hypothesis, you're going to make this prediction. It needs to be a really specific prediction. So you can't just say some candy will get taken more than other. Like, that's not a specific prediction. You need to say what type of candy. So it is a specific prediction, and it needs to have a rationale or a why. And you'll be able to write this because you'll know why you have made this alternative hypothesis. Okay, so getting back to our independent variable. Our independent variable is the type of candy, right? And so in this particular instance with my friend James, we have 7 different types of candy. So this is really tricky to write an alternative hypothesis because we would have to say, like, we think that more nerds will be taken than Sour Skittles because nerds are cuter, but less nerds will be taken than Reese's because everybody likes peanut butter or like something. And so this is just going to get crazy in a hurry. And so the alternative hypothesis is easier to think about conceptually, easier to explain, and easier to write if you just have a few options for the independent variable. And so what we're going to do with my friend James's candy is, although he really feels like these 7 kinds are super different, we are going to lump this all together into chocolate candies and non-chocolate candies. Because already, as I say this, I'm confident that you're like, aha, I know what my alternative hypothesis will be, right? Because if you love chocolate, you think, of course, people will take the chocolate more. If you're worried that the chocolate might melt because maybe it's still hot in October, you're like, oh no, no one will take the chocolate, right? And so as soon as we come up with 2 options for the independent variable, it's usually then a lot easier for the scientist to figure out a rationale for why they expect one outcome over another. And so our alternative hypothesis in this case, because I really like chocolate and I feel like nerds, etc., are kind of just like a waste of perfectly good sugar, actually. So I am going to say, you don't need to say I expect. You could just say more chocolate candies will be taken than non-chocolate candies. Here is the critical because, indicating that we're now entering the rationale section, because chocolate is much tastier and everyone loves chocolate. Or I could have just said, because I like chocolate better. Another important thing for me to mention while I'm thinking about it is a different control. So we talked about the type of dish. A different control would be the number of pieces to start with. So if you have a different number of pieces of each candy, then that can also influence your result. And so we would have to have the starting the same number of pieces of candy. Okay, so hopefully this gives you guys an idea. Basically, if you're presented with a scenario, then just imagine the scenario in your head and imagine if you are the scientist, what thing are you changing? And then what thing are you measuring as a result, right? And so, right, I was going to give you an example, but I might use it on the test, so never mind. Oh, I'll just tell you, and then I won't use it on the test. Okay, so I saw this awesome study where they were trying to figure out the effect of zebra stripes. And so what happened was the scientist got these zebra stripe coats and put them on all these horses. And so they added the zebra stripes, or they added a solid color blanket to the horse. And so that's the change the scientists made, was the stripiness of the horse. And then the dependent variable, remember, it is the outcome variable and has to be measurable. The dependent variable was the number of flies that land on the stripy versus the solid horses. Hence, more flies landed on the solid horses, indicating that zebra stripes are a way to not get flies to land on you. They found out that what happens is, because of the stripes, the flies can't tell how far away they are, and they just smash into the zebras and bounce off. They can't even land. It's pretty hilarious, actually. Okay, so hopefully this has helped you guys to understand independent and dependent variable, and then null and alternative hypothesis.